Good morning, everybody. My name is Bernard Harris. I work in Nitrates and Biodiversity Division in the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. I'm here today to talk about water quality and agriculture. In terms of, just to give you an overview of the structure of farming in Ireland, I've used the most recent census data of 2016. And as you can see, there's a total of 137,500 farms in Ireland. I'll go through the sector breakdown in the next slide a little bit more. The average farm size in Ireland is approximately 32.4 hectares, of which grassland is the biggest proportion of agricultural land within Ireland, hosting about 4 million hectares. By and large, we have a significant livestock sector within Ireland. We have 7.2 million cattle, which include dairy cows. So that livestock piece has stabilized over the recent year. However, there's been an increase in dairy cows in this period. In terms of the structural breakdown across farm systems, as you can see, the vast majority of farms, they are mainly beef farms, which are 78,000 farms. Then again, there's some mainly sheep farms, which represent 15,000 farms. And then our more intensive sector, both the specialist dairy and specialist tillage sectors, making up approximately 20,000 farms. By and large, there is an intensive cohort of farms within Ireland, primarily focused at specialist dairy, tillage, and our pig and poultry sectors. The agri-food sector is very important to our economy. As you can see, the agri-food sector accounts for 6.7% of the GNI in 2019. From an employee perspective, it employs roughly 164,000 people, representing 7.1% of the workforce in 2020. Agri-food exports have grown by 60% since 2010 to 14.2 billion. And the Irish exports of agri-food products accounts for a total of 9% of exports and 12% of imports in 2020. So it's a very indigenous sector within Ireland, employing a lot of people and very important for our rural economy. I suppose looking at the overall picture, and I suppose the discussion here is around the protection of water, drinking water sources, but looking at the wider nature itself in terms of water and biodiversity. We have sector targets when it comes to water quality. The Water Framework Directive ensures that we must ensure a good ecological status by at least 2027. The third cycle of the current river basin management plan is in place, and there is a current draft of the next cycle currently been drafted, but it is challenging for agriculture. The Nitrates Directive is Ireland's contribution to the river basin management plan. Agriculture is a key component of that. So reducing and minimizing losses from agriculture is something that will be centrally involved in the next cycle of the river basin management plan. From a biodiversity perspective, we have a Habitats Directive in place, and under Article 17 report in 2019, we are under significant pressure in terms of biodiversity loss within Ireland. So more has to be done to protect biodiversity also. But I suppose the central comment I would like to make is, while the focus here is on water, we as a country are looking for as many co-benefits when we look at every policy position within Ireland. So looking at water, biodiversity, climate and air quality in order to seek as many co-benefits to improve the environmental metrics as possible. Looking at, and I'm sure this has been covered by previous speakers, but I suppose looking at the significant pressures causing the impacts within the third cycle of the river basin management plan. And I suppose it is clear from the graph here that agriculture is a significant impact, and the most significant impact in terms of deteriorating water quality. There is no doubt agriculture, it's clear that the minimization of nutrient and sediment losses to water is an important component of this. And agriculture has more to do in terms of reducing that trend and reducing decline in water quality in Ireland. I suppose to focus on one particular area within agriculture, and it's the whole nitrogen piece. And Added to that, I suppose it's the regionalization of agricultural nitrogen issues that have happened in recent years. And I suppose it's important to note that nitrogen losses have increased, surpluses have increased at farm levels, so those losses have also increased. Agriculture is the main source nationally in terms of nitrogen losses. And it's important to reflect why this has happened and the potential issues that have caused this. There was a spike in losses in 2018, and I suppose the most critical reason for that was the climate impact of a drought in 2018, where we saw legacy nitrogen coming through the system and causing spikes within our nitrogen losses within that year. Looking at the two column graphs on the bottom of the page, if you take the one on the left, I suppose this is a catchment or a summation of catchments where the annual loss of nitrogen from catchments without nitrogen issues. So as you can see, the average tonnage is relatively low considering the size of the catchment. I suppose where, looking at the graph in the middle, or the bar chart in the middle, where annual loss of nitrogen from catchment with nitrogen issues is a problem. As you can see, they exponentially increase in terms of the nitrogen losses within those catchments. I suppose referring to the picture of Ireland on the right-hand side of the graph, as you can see, I suppose those rivers or water bodies in the darker colors are showing increased nitrate levels within the system. I suppose the long-term impact around our estuaries is an important factor where we see nitrate levels increasing within these catchments and within these estuaries. So it is a regional issue around the south and southeast that needs to be monitored, but additional measures do need to be put in place in terms of managing this situation. I suppose take this a step further in terms of how are we going to target agricultural nutrient measures for maximum co-benefits. And looking at the picture of Ireland on the right-hand side of the screen, I suppose those areas in blue potentially are areas where phosphorus and sediment loss are predominant. So we need to break the pathway. We need to ensure that we need to minimize overland flow from all water bodies and break that pathway to ensure sediment and phosphorus loss is minimized. There are significant co-benefits for nature within this. We know if we can build those buffer strips, for example, along water courses, along water bodies, we also build biodiversity and nature corridors within that. Secondly, I suppose those areas in yellow in the south and southeast, measures are required to reduce nitrogen losses within those areas. But I suppose the key difference is we need to control losses at source in terms of nitrogen. And within that, from an agricultural perspective, we're looking at all sources of nitrogen coming through the farm gate, whether that's concentrates going into the cow in terms of reducing crude protein. The co-benefits for climate and ammonia are clear. If we can recycle more nutrients within our slurries, within our farmyard manures, for example, we can become more efficient and reduce our reliance on chemical nitrogen nationally. So I suppose the mantra is the right measure in the right place in order to target measures. Certainly from a phosphorus perspective, there's been significantly, there's a lot of measures put in place for example, phosphorus losses through buffers, through the long-term environmental schemes under CAP. From a nitrogen perspective, controlling that source through the regulations, minimizing through the current allowances under the regulation are important in terms of tackling nitrogen losses. It's important to reflect, and I've mentioned it now in terms of the regionalization of how the livestock sector has changed and evolved. And I suppose looking at the sector in general in terms of agriculture, and the biggest change from a policy perspective has been the removal of milk quotas. And I suppose what we have seen is that looking at some figures there, comparing 2015 bovine nitrogen figures versus 2018 bovine nitrogen figures, and it's the percentage change. So those farmers operating above 170 essentially have made the biggest jump in terms of increasing livestock within their holdings. If we look at the box on the bottom of the screen, we can now see that those farmers operating above 170 have now 9% of the land, are now 9% of the farms, 14% of the land area, but also hold 33% of the bovines or 65% of the dairy animals within those systems. So I suppose reflecting the picture that I presented at the start of this presentation around the economic piece, we can see a significant divergence within the livestock sector. The vast majority of our livestock farmers are extensive by nature. However, there are a significant intensive cohort of farmers that contribute significant amounts to environmental sustainability. The department significantly supports water quality. So there has been a proactive response to supporting water measures over the last number of years. There are a number of ways of doing this. The regulatory revisions. We have a strong regulatory framework currently in Ireland. We have a nitrates action programme in place from 2018 to this present year, 2021. And unlike other member states, it includes both nitrogen and phosphorus. As I mentioned, our current programme is in place to the end of this year, and a review is currently underway for the next programme. There are a significant number of measures introduced as part of the current programme, such as nutrient management planning, buffer measures, and this year alone, there has been additional measures put in as part of the programme, such as farm roadways, fencing and water courses, and also the setback distances of water troughs back 20 metres. Added to that, in 2019, considering our most intensive cohort of farmers, which are our derogation farmers, we sought to undertake a voluntary review of the nitrates derogation. And as part of that review, we introduced a significant number of measures for those farmers to improve efficiency at farm level. In 2020, further measures were introduced for farmers operating above 170 kilos of organic nitrogen, which equated to approximately 5,000 farmers, which included the various measures above, plus the introduction of low emission and also liming program for these farmers. Added to that, the online movement of export of organic manures has gone online. To date, at a national level, we receive 14,500 paper export forms. So from the 1st of September this year, they have now gone online. So all movements must be now made that way. From a validation and a verification perspective, the department now can validate these in real time. In terms of collaborations and research, it is ongoing with our government departments, our agencies nationally. In 2020, we funded again the agricultural catchments programme to the tune of 2.5 million per annum. So essentially, the agricultural catchments programme has been there since 2006, and it is there essentially through 6 pillar catchments to evaluate the current measures under the Nitrates Action Programme. It's an important facility for Ireland to take Ireland forward in terms of identifying the measures that work at farm and also at catchment scale. In 2021, we've asked Teagasc to model various scenarios of measures to meet agricultural commitments to water quality targets. I suppose this goes hand in hand in terms of the current review of the programme that is in place. So that modelling scenario has finalised, and Teagasc have published a report on that. But it gives a clear signal of potential measures that could be used in Ireland's next Nitrates Action Programme. And these were included as part of the current public consultation. In 2021 also, we supported the National Federation of Group Water Schemes to the tune of 500,000 for delivery of source protection pilot projects. So very exciting projects. Obviously, Jean is going to talk about them further, but from our perspective and agriculture perspective, it's important that measures are put on the ground to protect drinking water. And this funding will be useful in terms of delivering this agenda to protect this source of water. As you all may be aware, the Agriculture Sustainability Support and Advisory Programme is now in its 3rd year. It's an establishment of a sustainability support and voluntary program and advice program for farmers, a collaborative initiative through funding supported by our own department, the Department of Housing, but also supported by industry through private advisors within the dairy cooperatives. So it is aimed at driving behavioural change towards better sustainable practices, and we have preliminarily seen some good results to date from the programme. And the purpose of it is to protect and improve water quality, contributing to meeting objectives under the Nitrates Directive and Water Framework Directive. It was introduced as part of a measure under the second phase of the River Basin Management Plan, and it's currently reviewed in terms of its next cycle progress. Looking on the regulatory framework that's currently in Ireland to protect water from nutrient losses, obviously Ireland signed up to the Nitrates Directive. And within that, we've seen various guises and commitments given by Ireland under the various statutory instruments developed since its introduction. From a national perspective, the current Nitrates Action Programme is in place. The Nitrates regulations, the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage is the lead authority for the Nitrates regulations under SI 605 of 2017. However, the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine implements and operates the Nitrates derogation SI 65 of 2018. And as mentioned before, we have a programme in place, which is to run out the end of 2021. We're currently in negotiations with the Commission on a new programme, but we have also a second stage consultation open, which is open for stakeholder views until the 20th of September this year. So as it stands, the Nitrates Review 2021 is ongoing. There was a first stage consultation launched last November 2020 and it closed in mid-January. We had over 100 submissions as part of that review and the first stage consultation. And since then, the Nitrates expert group who oversee the process developed the second stage consultation paper, which is currently out for public consultation. And as I mentioned, is closed, and this consultation is closed this 20th of September 2021. It is open to everybody to submit comments as part of that consultation. So I'd encourage everybody who's here today or anybody that is aware or has an interest in water quality to submit any potential concerns they may have around Ireland's Nitrates Action Programme, what they consider of the proposed measures as part of the review process, and is there anything additional or that need to be revised as part of the proposed measures presented. I suppose where we're going to come from in terms of this and looking at the further analysis that needs to be done, I suppose we understand and we know now that where agriculture is a problem, obviously phosphorus runoff from poorly draining soil is the biggest issue for rivers and lakes. So there appears to be a trend in that it is stabilizing. However, more work needs to be done. I mentioned at the start of this presentation that nitrogen trends are increasing, especially in estuaries in the south and southeast. So more work needs to be done around reducing that source load protection. And but we do recognize that there are a significant number of factors that can influence any potential losses at both farm gate, catchment scale at national level, to include our soil, any climate potential impacts, which we see the results of 2018 and the legacy results of that still coming through. Farm practice are important drivers at farm scale. So we now have the better tools. Obviously, critical source area maps for nitrogen and phosphorus have been referenced, and ourselves, working with our colleagues in the Department of Housing, but also working with the EPA, have developed now national critical source area maps for both phosphorus and nitrogen. There is a collaborative approach to implementing measures in targeted areas, such as the ASAP program, for example, that I've referred to already. So there's a significant level of targeting going on, and that has enhanced the messaging and the importance of the issues identified that need to be solved. I suppose the long-term strategic priorities must be recognised in this discussion also, and looking at EU proposed policies that are currently being discussed. And the Green Deal as something, as an overarching policy, has some very positive positive deliverables. However, under that, the farm to fork and biodiversity strategy set some very targeted measures that member states must reach. And to focus on water quality, I think it's important to reflect water is targeted under the farm to fork and biodiversity strategies, whereby it is proposed that a 20% reduction in chemical nitrogen use, but also a 50% in reduction in nutrient losses to water is achieved by 2030. So while ambitious, it does put a time frame and a focus in terms of how policies must prioritize to meet these proposed targets. In terms of policy alignment, and I suppose the key focus here is going to be on the Common Agricultural Policy. There is a current Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 commitments under the current CAP. We're currently in a transitional period between programs, and we have secured additional funding within that transitional period to deliver on a couple of additional schemes. The next CAP obviously is still in negotiation. The public consultation for the CAP strategic plan closed last Friday. But essentially speaking, it had looked for views from all stakeholders in relation to how Ireland's CAP strategic plan will meet the objectives of Ireland to deliver on its environmental ambitions. It is important to reflect how, I suppose, as part of the last Common Agricultural Policy, how we've guided policy and science to give us an insight in relation to how we can develop schemes further under both transitional measures and under the next proposed CAP. I suppose the Irish EIP Agri operational groups are a steering light in terms of identifying what options are out there. What are the key learnings that could be adopted, especially from the results-based scheme type programs, whereby what learnings could we take from these that could be then brought across the mainstream program delivery at a national level. So I suppose this does bring me on to, the next iteration of a proposed CAP is around a results-based model. So what this essentially means is payments linked to quality of environmental results. And our current program, GLOS, it is primarily a prescription-based program. So for example, if you have low emission spreading of slurries, what that means is you'll get paid for X quantity of slurry spread under the measure. But how it differentiates in terms of results-based, it's that now we're going to be scoring to identify how practices have impacted environmentally, and scores will be calculated using indicators, both positive and negative. So there is an incentive there for the farmer to do more for the environment to reach a higher payment. So the highest score gets the greatest payment. So while an innovative approach, it is certainly taking some of the significant learnings from the EIP, including it in how we should take forward new programs into the future. As I said, there are examples there that how this has been delivered at a project and even a catchment level through the Burn project, Hen Harrier project, Bride project, for example. So there's a lot of good outcomes from these that will be considered as part of the next CAP. So to bring you through, I suppose, the latest environmental scheme 2-year offering through the transitional period is the new REAP program. And looking at its overall objectives from our perspective was to test its suitability of model nationally and feasibility for upscaling. And that's a very important. And while, yes, we might have a significant level of ambition to deliver additional environmental credentials, it has to be workable. It has to be able to be administratively delivered at a national level. There will need to be training required. And also there need to be identified barriers for the buy-in to the program. However, it has been successfully launched since and oversubscribed. So I suppose for us, the test the suitability of the department's procedures and systems is important in order to identify control and inspection implications. So it is to test the monitoring and evaluation needs of a program, both long and short term. The scoring system proposed is a scorecard to assess the field, boundary and margins. It will be undertaken by a trained advisor with the participation of the farmer, and year one will be based on the quality of the existing features. So from an operational perspective, all the scores will be uploaded to the department system. GLAM, it's what it's called by the advisor. And obviously a score is presented and a payment recommended. I suppose this brings me on finally, how does this feed into the next Common Agricultural Policy in relation to how do we see the next CAP visually and being developed over the next number of years? I suppose the big change coming through on Pillar 1. So currently within the current CAP, there's a Pillar 1 program whereby a farmer gets a single farm payment or his basic payment under Pillar 1. The big change to that now is that it's been split into two areas. One is conditionality, which mirrors cross-compliance or the basic payment system. But the second aspect is there'll be a percentage of funding now segregated out for an eco scheme nationally. So essentially what that means is farmers must do more in terms of adapting and putting in place additional measures under an eco scheme to receive their full payment under Pillar 1. In terms of Pillar 2, there will be a new long-term environmental scheme proposed as part of the next programme. And it will include more targeting, but also adopt the results-based model that I've gone through as part of REAP, but also the key learnings taken through the EIP. Added to that, there will be significant level of knowledge transfer. There'll also be an investment under the TAM scheme proposed under the next programme, along with another suite of measures within it. The time frame currently for the current CAP is that we're currently in year one of a 2-year transitional period. And after that transitional period, it is planned the next Common Agricultural Policy will take effect. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention. I suppose within the current framework of how I've presented water quality, I think we must recognize that it's all nature. It's all about protecting all the environmental metrics within the current system. So looking for as many co-benefits as possible across the environment, aligning policy to ensure that where the co-benefits can be achieved, that it is achieved efficiently and supported where required within the budgetary revisions that we do have. So with that, I'd like to say thank you for your attention and take any questions. Thank you.